Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's a Wednesday afternoon, midweek, and I'm here with John Hughes and Patrick McGill. I'm going to start off with a positive because I'm going to speak about Jock Stein. It's 40 years today since the passing of the great man. And I'm going to start off with that, Patrick, because there's no way you're 40. But John and I will remember that night well. And what I'm going to start off by saying is, Jock Stein, when he was at Celtic, John, tell me if I'm wrong here. I seen him as the figurehead. I seen him as Celtic's leader. How come now we've got people in the boardroom who appear to be the leaders of Celtic? Because that's what's happened in time, isn't
it? Yeah. I mean, the way we're set up at the moment, I'm not sure. He was certainly the figurehead, much as Brendan is now, but the board was just as Bob Kelly wasn't really, but after that, it sort of descended into what we ended up with and had to get rid of. So, but he was certainly the most prominent figure, and quite rightly. I mean, if things are going well, if your manager's doing well, if he's getting the resources he needs, etc., and things are going well on the park, why should you hear from them? If everyone knows, for instance, that the unified vision is to win the European Cup, that's fairly straightforward. So we don't need any more clarity on that. Look, Jock was a larger-than-life figure. Obviously, my old man had his problems with him, but it doesn't take away from what Jock did. And that's those are personal grievances. But Jock was a huge figure in the history of Celtic, and that can never be diminished in any way. He was a fantastic manager. Obviously I know that period of history relatively well, but the Celtic hadn't won a thing for about 5 years before Jock came in. It was that bad. We weren't even expected to. So, and my old man was there for that first 5 years as well. So the difference between the first 5 years and the second 5 years was fairly stark. Winning nothing to winning everything. That pretty much sums up what Jock did. We won nothing, then we won everything. And that was the delineation point was when he joined. That I don't think you can, level any higher praise than that.
No, you're right. And, I have looked into that period of time whereby it was really Jock's playing contemporaries that had last won a trophy for Celtic prior to him taking over as a manager. It was that great, that side in the 50s who did great things, but couldn't do them consistently enough, winning doubles and stuff, John, beating Rangers 7-1 in the League Cup final in 57. Then Jock comes back as a manager in 65. He is the single most reason that Celtic were put on the map back then, Patrick. And even though you're a young spud, you appreciate that as much as anyone. And if we're talking about leadership, none more so than now do Celtic need leaders.
Absolutely, yeah. He was obviously a towering figure back in the day. The reason that Celtic are, in many ways, the club that they are, sort of famous across Europe, famous for 1967, famous for the Lions and that 9-in-a-row period where we had such great success. Obviously the pinnacle of the club's football and achievements. That's a 65 to 74 period. And we do need these leaders. And I seen a great comment, to be fair, just before the season actually kicked off, where I think it was when Brendan was one of the many times he was basically coming out and begging for players and saying how he is the only person who we are consistently getting communication from.
Yes.
I know you wanted it to be a positive start, and I sort of slightly went on a wee tangent there, but to go back to Big Jock, he was obviously, such a commanding presence, such a, as I say, put Celtic on the map. And obviously very sad that night. I think it was Ninian Park, wasn't it, down in Wales? I think don't know if we got an equaliser or a winner, helped Scotland qualify for Mexico in '86, and he passed away of a heart attack. And And he is, for me, this might scare both of you a bit, but he's obviously, I wasn't alive back then, and I wasn't old enough to remember the O'Neill period. So in many ways, those are the two pinnacles of Celtic's both European and domestic success, and they're both, it's more of a legend and a fairy tale than it is memory for me. It was, as you said at the start, you might remember the passing of Jock, Stein, and I'm sure you certainly remember the glory days of Martin O'Neill. But to take it on to Martin, actually, whenever you hear Martin talk, he talks about when he came into Celtic, the aim should always be to try and emulate the Lions, which obviously is an impossible task. There's no way that record has been beaten. The sort of 30 miles from Celtic Park, 11 guys winning the European Cup. Even Celtic winning the Champions League, I think we would all admit, is nigh on impossible these days with the financial gap. But to aim for that, to aim for the stars and land on the moon, to sort of put it another way, to aim high, and I think that's something that we all agree is missing currently from the vast majority of the non-footballing leaders at Celtic. So I think, we should look to try and emulate and look back and appreciate what Jock, Stein and the Lions did back in the day by putting us in the map and making us the sort of culturally significant footballing club that we are today in the continent of Europe. And no, I don't think, as I say, we're going to win the European Cup again anytime soon, but we should be at least aiming to compete in that competition, and certainly at a higher level than what we are now.
Yeah, Patrick mentions the moon. John, I think our board live in the dark side of the moon. We never hear from them. We never see them. And you have updated your backdrop to that effect. We've not spoken since last week. Quite a bit's happened, John. Excited by the open letter and then the response. Give me your breakdown of this, John. We need everybody's view on this. And I know a lot of people will be waiting with bated breath as to your thoughts. Blow by blow, give us your view on this.
Well, sorry, I'm just doing my weekly introduction now. We just update me things at the end of it. Unprecedented dereliction of duty, unforgivable, inexcusable, totally avoidable, utterly predictable. Last week, we added in completely humiliating, and I think this week we can add in the utterly breathtakingly condescending and arrogant. And I think that pretty much covers it. Okay. No, the breakdown is. I mean, I've done. Look, things were bad. But, I mean, as everyone said, Stephen McGower, what a way to pour paraffin in a bin fire. I mean, it is mental. That statement is mental. You're so far removed, and not only that, the machinations leading up to it were utterly reminiscent of, Peter Lawwell's worst period. The briefing against the manager in the Sun of all places. I mean, giving them anything but a brief against the manager, that's just shocking. And then, obviously, on the Friday, they'd thought that they would get their sort of loyal affiliations in. They'd give them the usual nonsense, and they would just go out and say, yeah, no, we're happy enough with that. And that's not what they got. And so that was a panic statement, obviously, gone out there. But whoever did that it was one of the worst things I've ever read. I was sitting minding my own business, as you are, sitting with a good lady, having a wee refreshment, watching Saturday night TV. And that popped up. I read it, and instantly the thing I tweeted out was, thanks for hearing our concerns behind closed doors. We're right, you're wrong, we're not changing our approach. That's the end of it, right? And that was a summary. Just to save you reading that statement, that is the summary of what they said. It was breathtaking. And then it was so bad that about half an hour later, I thought, do you know something? That seems weirdly bad. And so I did this. Bear with me here, there is a point. Club statement, Celtic Football Club. At Celtic Football Club, we remain fully committed to delivering sustainable excellence both on and off the pitch. We understand that in today's fast-moving digital age, narratives can quickly take hold, particularly on social media platforms where context and nuance are often lost. We wish to reassure our valued stakeholders that the club's leadership continues to operate within a long-term strategic vision. While we appreciate the passion of our supporter base, it is important to note that football recruitment is a highly complex process. Contrary to online speculation, identifying and acquiring and integrating top-level talent is not as simple as some would have you believe. Many factors, including market inflation, rival clubs artificially inflating valuations, and stringent UEFA financial sustainability regulations, can create challenging dynamics beyond our control. Our prudent and carefully calibrated investment strategy ensures that Celtic remains financially robust in an unpredictable footballing ecosystem, while others chase short-term gratification. We remain steadfast in safeguarding the long-term prosperity of the institution. In relation to fan engagement, we have consistently provided communication through established channels, though we recognise that instant gratification in the form of real-time updates has become the expectation in the social media era. We respectfully remind supporters that sensitive transfer negotiations cannot and should not be conducted via public commentary. As for the matchday experience, Celtic Park continues to be recognised as one of Europe's most iconic footballing venues. We are, of course, continuously renewing operational processes to ensure that the overall customer journey remains aligned with best-in-class benchmarks, but naturally, there will always be areas where perception and reality differ. In closing, we reaffirm that every decision undertaken by the board is guided by data-driven analysis, global best practice, and a relentless focus on sustainable success. We encourage all supporters to rise above reactionary discourse and trust in the leadership team who, unlike online commentators, have full visibility on the challenges and opportunities facing the modern game. Together, we will continue to move forward strategically, sustainably, and successfully. Celtic PLC, creating value and inspiring legacy. That is 100% ChatGPT. And the prompt I put into ChatGPT was this, and that shows you, because I think that statement's better than their statement.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And the prompt I put into ChatGPT, as you know, if you've used AI, you give it a command, it has to be at least 20 words. Write a club statement from Celtic Football Club. The language should be littered with corporate cliches. The statement should address the concerns of the fans over failures in recruitment, lack of investment in the playing squad, lack of communication with fans, and poor matchday experience. The statement should seek to avoid all accountability for the board of the PLC and deflect blame onto social media hysteria, fans' lack of understanding of transfer business, other teams overvaluing players we want to buy, and UEFA financial sustainability rules. The underlying tone should be really condescending to the fans. That's the instruction that I gave to ChatGPT, and it came up with an almost identical statement, except mine was better, I think. It was less
condescending, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Even though I gave it the instruction to be as condescending as possible, it was less condescending than what they gave out. It was absolutely mental. And I'm sorry for the long time, but I think it has to be made. That point has to be made. And someone else, one of my followers, then ran it through the AI detection software, and it was 60% AI, right? So it was being detected as AI. So what they've done is they've done what I did, and then they've added bits in. They've polished it up a wee bit, added bits in. But I would wager, if you looked at the thing they produced to start off with, it was probably better than what they actually put out. The bits they've added in are so much worse than what ChatGPT would have produced. It's absolutely wild how the decision-making processes that got to that point. What are you thinking? Who read that and thought, that speaks for me? Yeah, that'll shut them up. I mean, the level of contempt. I mean, what did I say there? The lack of accountability. This is 3 weeks ago. Lack of accountability equates to utter contempt. That's what we were saying. But what they did, the reason why they've unified everyone is they have removed all doubt. That's why everyone is now unified. Because we were speculating. We were speculating about the transfer system. We were speculating about things we didn't think were happening. We were speculating about relationships. We were speculating what they thought about us. And they confirmed all of it. It's an utter shambles run by arrogant men who cannot see what they're doing is not the right way to approach it, and refuse to make any change to deal with it. And it is, I mean, well done, good job in uniting the fan base. I mean, I can't think of another single thing that could have united the fan base, but whoa, I mean, in any other organisation, whoever wrote that statement would have been sacked on Monday morning. But I mean, you can't really sack the algorithm, can you? You know what I mean? So it's just wild, absolutely wild.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say it's set in motion, a chain of events, because that was already in motion. But last Wednesday, Patrick, if us three had sat here in our respective areas to talk Celtic for an hour, and I had closed off by saying, this is what I think the club will do. I think the club will release a hit piece on Brendan Rodgers in The Sun, and then they'll release something that is AI-driven, corporate jargon, blaming everybody else on Saturday night, at a time that I know every time is specific, but normally you would say, right, put that out at such and such a time, and it would be 7 o'clock or 7:30 or 8 o'clock, It just randomly dropped out of nowhere. You would think I was being negative last week, but that's exactly how it played out, Patrick. I mean, we now have a situation, like John says, the fans have come together. And by the way, I was on a radio show the other night, and it's late, and I've spoken all day, and it's live, and I used a word that I made up. That's how stressed out I was about it. I said that it's galvanated the Celtic fans. Of course, what I thought was coming out my mouth was galvanised. So apologies for anyone who thought that word did exist and has used it since. I'm just a numpty. But Patrick, the way that this has panned out has played right into the hands of, if a fan group could become mobilised, organised, then you could have a fan movement. And as John says, they have removed all doubt from what our concerns were last week, haven't they?
They absolutely have. Saturday night, you would think that they're trying to hide that statement, but I mean, there's absolutely no chance that was ever going to sort of be swept under the rug, and fans are going to miss this. I think there's two potential reasons they released that on the Saturday night. They had those meetings on the sort of Friday evening, I want to say Friday afternoon, with the CSA, the affiliation, and the Association of Irish Celtic Supporters Clubs. So it's either been rushed and put out as quickly as possible, or they are genuinely trying to hide it by putting it out on a Saturday night. I think it's a bit of both, actually, knowing this board. I think it's a bit of both. And then just, looking through the statement, it's hard to describe certain aspects as anything other than pure lies. I mean, blaming UEFA is just pure nonsense. We are nowhere near that 70% FSR, PSR, whatever you want to call it. We have turned a massive profit in just about every window for the last, 4 seasons at least. We're sitting on a mountain of cash. We turned a massive profit this window. I think we only spent about 13 million, and we brought in at least 25 with Kuhn, Frimpong, all sorts of other little sort of bits of money. Lager Bielkart, I think 2.2 million for Braga. Absolute nonsense. To then have a go at the mainstream media, and as if no other club is subjected to mainstream media speculation. Every other club does their transfer business in total anonymity, of course. And of course, fair play to Stephen McGowan. I think it was the Herald he wrote in. I'm sure it used to be the Daily Mail, but I think it was the Herald. Just immediately bouncing back, batting them away, calling it out as pure nonsense. And I think they actually are probably sitting there quite surprised at just how far this has gone, because, as you say, you've been on Sky, I think, a couple of times to discuss this, as well as the other sort of omni-shambles that it has become, with the Champions League.
I should have used that word. Absolutely.
I mean, at first it was the Champions League exit, then it was deadline day, and now this just pure insulting the fan base, treating us as nothing other but customers who they think that they can, they have over a barrel, which in many ways they do, but I think that, time is quickly running out. And, Simon Jordan on TalkSport ripping it apart, yourself and others going on Sky News ripping it apart. I think BBC Radio Scotland, I think McFadden and Michael Stewart again ripping it apart, calling it a PR disaster, just totally embarrassing. It's everyone else's fault but theirs. They're brilliant they're untouchable, and we've all idiots and we don't know what's going on. One other point I did find quite strange was towards the beginning of the statement, they used the term "the club" quite a lot, which I found quite strange because the football captain, Callum McGregor, was out begging for players. The manager was out begging for players. Us as fans were out begging for players. It's not the club that's failing here. It's the guys at a senior level, guys like Desmond, who basically run the club, guys in the boardroom who are totally incompetent and are paid far too much for the little job that they do. So I don't think it is the club per se that is failing here. It's a handful of 5, 10, 15 people who have not only wrote this statement but have brought on this absolute shambles. I mean, even just I'm looking at the statement just now. At the start, they say that they welcome dialogue and are always willing to learn lessons. I mean, it's like it was some sort of comedy act. They've not learned any lessons from the last 10 or 15 years of Champions League failure, transfer window failure. They've not learned a single thing. And just to wrap up, because I have went on a bit here, but the open letter that I think 356 CSCs and 56 fan media / fan organisations have signed. It had 7 questions to the board, none of them answered by that statement. I think the main points of the open letter were to have open communication with the support and to understand why the transfer window and the qualifiers were such a massive failure. And their version of communication with supporters is to release a 1,000-word statement. So my suggestion, and you might not like this, Paul John, is that Acsom should just get rid of the Daily Bulletin and we should just release a 1,000-word statement at 12:30 every weekday, because that is how the board think the best method of communication is. No sit-down interviews like the Rangers director of football done with Sky just after the Derby game. No interview, no sit down with Jimmy McCulloch with scripted questions. Just release a nameless statement out into the world, and that's good enough for these guys. So, I mean, it really is breathtaking. I mean, it's going from bad to worse to an absolute disaster, and I can only hope. I know Acsom have obviously signed the open letter, and I think the North Curve Twitter account was talking about next steps.
Yeah.
At a meeting either today or tomorrow or later this week. They're very lucky that this Hibs game is still 2 weeks away, because I think that is obviously where it's going to reach a boiling point, and hopefully there can be some action taken by then, because I mean, it's what an embarrassing set of 2 weeks this has been.
Those Rangers fans who have been on my social media accusing the normal studio space that I use as being my bedroom, that person walking about isn't my dad, by the way. That's the videographer who's setting up for This Is Acsom. We are in a different studio today because we're going to be interviewing David Lowe. I have my views on how this is going to pan out. I'll share as much as I can at this stage, but I'm going to be talking to David about the aftermath, if you like, of the Celtic Trust AGM last week and what David and his team are aiming to do in terms of the shareholder side of the representation at the football club. Because there are a number of small shareholders who, if they were to come together, and we've shown how Celtic fans can come together in the last week, then they could become far more of a voice in the Celtic boardroom. Now, this is one of the things we started talking about leadership, John. And you talk about the type of leadership that Celtic has. The reason that they actually see nothing wrong with the Sun hit piece, the statement, and they think we're the bad guys for mobilising and coming together, is because they constantly say, but look at the money we've made and look at the success we've had. So every time I speak to someone who's not got any skin in the game, who are brilliant presenters, I mean, phenomenal presenters, but they really don't know what's happening at Celtic, that's the kind of angle they always come from. What are you guys moaning about? And I think that is always their protective blanket, isn't it? We're the most successful football club in this small wee pond. What else do you want? But it's far more nuanced than that, isn't it?
Oh, very much so. And just say the type of leadership, to get back to Patrick's point, I mean, I just had visions in my head of like that statement being written and like Nicholson or Mackay, hey, Chris, wait till you hear this bit. The club takes Celtic supporters' views extremely seriously. We're going to open with that, right? Right? That's an absolute peach. Right? And then we can use your one. We are listening to the views expressed by our supporters. Oh, geez, this is comedy gold. You know, what a Saturday night they must have had. But yes, obviously, the club is financially well run. No question about that. But at what expense? At what cost? You know, and is it not possible to run a club well, like Club Brugge do? Is it not possible to run the club well and also be successful? Is that difficult? Because they seem to be far more successful than us at the moment, and that's the model that we are supposed to be following. I mean, they took in about 70 million this summer and spent 50. You know what I mean? And we appear to have just been terrified at the fact we spent some money last year and aren't up for signing anyone at all. And the gradual decline of the squad gets us to this situation where, you know, the squad's a mess, absolute mess now. And if we win the league this year, it'll be because the manager and players pulled it out the bag with no help from the board whatsoever. So, I mean, to say it's nuance, you know, the thing about it is they're bringing in all the money, but yes, but we have fans. Well, we are not sitting in the stands watching the bank balance. That's not what we're there for, you know. And when you consider, you know, I mean, that dismissive contempt, that, you know, unbreachable certainty of approach in the face of unified opposition from the fans is an arrogance that would be considered absolute madness in any other form of business, where you are just basically slapping the fans in the face, spitting in the eye of the fans and just saying, listen, this is the way we do it. If you don't like it, whatever. You know, we've done well financially. Couldn't give a monkeys. Oh, you're the people that put money in the club. Yeah, we know that, but we're the ones in charge of it. So, you know, whatever. What are you going to do about it? And I think we're going to find out what we're going to do about it. Because I have repeatedly said on here that I don't think you'll get unanimity on, you know, boycotting merch, boycotting, you know, attendance. I don't think you'll get unanimity. But, and I made this point the other night again as well. Is a tipping point for me as well, because I don't care what it is that's agreed. You know, we just need to get behind what it is that's agreed. Is it going, well, I sent this message out the other night. To those saying what difference will it make to protest, chants, boycotts, etc., the answer is, who knows? Will it dislodge Dermot Desmond? Obviously not. Will it lead to change? Who knows? But here's your choices, action or inaction. Do you remember any famous inactivists?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And we've got no choice now. I mean, they've made it clear they want change. So, is there any way we can get rid of Desmond? No, not really. Not in the short term. There's nothing we can do. But we need to make it absolutely clear. We are not going to get behind this board and this approach. We cannot get behind what you're doing. You are destroying the team. You're destroying the entertainment value. You're destroying the reasons that we love the club, all for the sake of having 100 million sitting in the bank, which you're now telling us you can't spend because it's against FSR regulations. You know, so it's utterly, you know, I keep taking the word, it's breathtaking how ineptly this has been handled, how poor the approach is, how bad the transfer window is. And I'll tell you what my solution would be is, you know, again, what we need, and we don't have it still, we need a director of football with executive power who can make deals within an agreed budget. We need a head of recruitment to help him. And we cannot have sign-off from the shareholders, right? You give the guy a budget, you leave him to do his job, that's it, right? If he messes up, he's accountable, he's gone. But we cannot have guys pulling the rug from, you know, and again, I saw people saying the other day they thought it was Nicholson that was pulling the rug on these deals. But that doesn't make any sense, I said before, because who's negotiating the deals then? It is Nicholson that's negotiating these deals. It's Nicholson and Mackay, because we don't have anyone else to do it. So if anyone's pulling the plug, and embarrassing us by, agreeing 8 million and then coming back with a bid of, 7.5 or 1.2 or whatever it is, the multiple stories that have done the rounds on that now, different situations, but the same thing. And again, we go back to that whole humiliation thing we were in. The embarrassment, has been bad enough over the last few weeks. But then to be treated with contempt by the people who've embarrassed the club so badly that nobody wants to deal with us, and you've got players and, agents and other club directors basically laughing at us saying we're a shambles. To be slapped in the face by those guys, that is where they've got this so badly wrong. So badly wrong.
Yeah, and when we're talking about, let's talk about Dermot Desmond then, because he seems to be the immovable object. For obvious reasons, he has such a stake in terms of shares in the club. Other stakeholders, and I made this point the other night, Celtic fans are stakeholders. Season ticket holders are stakeholders. We might not be shareholders. I mean, I remember the share issue coming out first time round under Fergus, and I was 15 or 16. I couldn't afford to buy them. If there was a share issue right now, I would be more than interested in buying my chunky shares. But you can't just focus on shareholders. You've got to look after your punters, your fans, those that are buying the merch. And I'm going to come back to that jersey that you're wearing at the moment, John, because that's bringing back flashbacks from the COVID season. That beautiful jersey as it is, by the way. But if we're talking about investment, Dermot Desmond, up to this point, Patrick, is always called the Celtic owner. He's called a majority shareholder, which he is not. He has more shares than everybody else, but he doesn't have a majority of shares. Celtic's biggest investor is the fan base. Season in, season out. It's the fan base that's the biggest investor. And the club need to start treating us like fans and not like the customer that John describes. The heat, I think, is on Dermot Desmond as much as it's on anyone else. The problem, though, Patrick, he's not a guy that lives in Glasgow. He's not a guy that ever faces the camera. He's not feeling the heat. He's on a golf course somewhere, playing golf. And Celtic is his plaything. We talk about styles of leadership. And if you look at abdicating authority, I'm now going to read from the AI, John. In stark contrast to engaged leadership, abdication characterises a leader's deliberate choice to step back from their responsibilities, frequently resulting in employees feeling abandoned without clear direction, support or constructive feedback. So on the one hand, as fans, we look at the end result, which is we didn't buy the players we wanted, we didn't buy them in time. Within the club, and I include the likes of Michael Nicholson in this, there's a lack of leadership at the very, very top, and that all leads back to Dermot Desmond, doesn't it, Patrick?
It does. I mean, in many ways, he is an absentee landlord, not there for the day-to-day, but you can only assume and accept that from the various sources that are relatively close to the inner workings of Celtic, that he is required for final sign-off for, big transfer spends. I seen a short clip from the Huddle Breakdown, which obviously Acsom's Alan Morrison is on with Duco James, and several people have said that we have negotiated and agreed terms with clubs for players, and then Desmond has come in and submitted a bid of half the value or a quarter of the value and totally sabotaged the deal, ruined the deal, and not only that, but embarrassed the club and the negotiating team. All because he thinks he knows best, because he is the billionaire owner. And you're right, he spends half his time playing golf. I'm sure he spends a majority of his time at, Sandy Lane, which he owns over in Barbados, playing golf, relaxing by the beach. Not a care in the world as to how we feel, probably laughing his head off at that statement that, the board engages and listens to supporters and is willing to learn lessons. And he is the problem. And I mean, short term, he has made it quite clear, and his son Ross has made it quite clear that they're not going to sell up. But on a longer term, and I'm obviously interested to hear what the next sort of open letter or statement will be from the North Curve, and what David Lowe has to say on Acsom later on, what the plan is. But I think long term, he is obviously the problem. And chants of sack the board are a good way of showing how angry the fan base is, how disgusted we are with the direction of the club, and just how many supporters are feeling that way. And I'm glad that, I think the latest tweet from the North Curve, the entire fan base is united, and I think the entire fan base is united, and it's been a long time since we've all felt like this. But chance have sacked the board. You could probably replace all 7 board members, executive and non-executive, and if Desmond gets 7 more of his pals in, the club would be run the same way. It doesn't really matter how good a negotiator we get. If Desmond comes in at the last minute and sabotages a deal for Dolberg, it's pointless. It is absolutely pointless. So he is the issue. He is, in one way, he is an absentee landlord, and in another way, he has far too much control and influence for a guy with 34% of voting shares. So I think it's clear that he is the problem. The only question is how on earth do you get rid of a guy? I know, John, you just said that the club is well run financially, which I do accept. I mean, we're obviously in a very healthy financial position, but we must be paying a lot more in corporation tax due to our massive profits than we would need to if we actually spent a bit of money either on infrastructure or on players. And then to sit on a cash pile that large, I'm not really sure. Others would know better than me, but it's all well and good having a buffer, having sort of, an emergency pot of money, but to sit on a cash pile that large is,
Yeah,
I think that's
you're right.
irresponsible. I think
You're
it's
right.
it shows a lack of vision.
I think I need to rephrase that. Well run operationally, I should say, because you're absolutely right. The inefficiencies of having that money there is one of the things that we've been talking about all this time. It seems to be serving no purpose apart from the fact we'll be paying tax on it. And they've just said to us, one of the most embarrassing things I've ever heard, that we can't use it to spend on players, because it doesn't count as part of the income. You're just, what are you talking about? And the lies around the FSR was unbelievable. And as for the sack the board chats, we definitely can't sing that during the game because there's a better than even chance that Yang and Maeda would stop to join in. So, we need to be careful when we're singing that. Is it before the game or after the game? But definitely not during the game in case it, doesn't affect the player psychologically, but literally stops them in their tracks so they can just applaud. So joking aside, though, I mean, we've spoken for ages about this. The only thing I think we can do is protest whatever way you see fit, but do something. So if you want to go at the games, you're not going to stop going to the games. Do something else. If you don't want to sing the chants, don't. Do something else. Whatever it is. But if we all make some sort of effort, whether it can't, we're never going to dislodge there until we've got a ludicrous amount of shares, and even then he controls basically Lindsay Train. So he's got 52%. So the most we can do is make life difficult for them, and I think that's what we have to do. We have to make life difficult for them. We have to make them recognise we will not accept that they're carrying on. Despite the fact they're able to dismiss us, we will make life difficult for them as much as possible.
The thing that I see, John, the coming together has been quite incredible. I'm going to go back to one of the points that stood out for me. I read that statement again last night, and it was the thinly veiled dig at Rangers going bust. And it's almost like a PTSD that they've got. It's like, if 2012 hadn't happened, what would your excuse have been? It's almost like, be careful what you wish for, guys, because you've seen what happened across the city. You need to get over that. The Celtic board needs to get away from this parochialism, where it's, as long as we're just a few points, just a few inches ahead of Rangers, we're all right. No, that's gone. That's been gone for a long, long time.
I mean, you thought... People said that so often, it was just like a cliche, and you're just like, no, of course they don't think that. But yet again, they just proved that they did.
Yep.
By mentioning it in that statement, that's not a dig. That is like an obsession.
Mm-hmm.
Who would have? In what world did Rangers come into this? You know what I mean? And the fact that you are still... We were talking about benchmarking, and our benchmark has to be in Europe, and it has to be, against this team and that team that are doing these things around. And they genuinely are. looking at that shambles for the last however many years across the city, and that's the benchmark, you know. And according to, I think it was James on the Huddle Breakdown, the only way that the financial sustainability comes into it is if you are budgeting for no European football whatsoever, no Europa, no conference, no anything. That's the only way that you start to be in danger of a breach. And the one thing we always said that would happen, all approaching this, we said this is going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that is exactly what they've done. That's exactly what they've done. But now the hilarity is, we need to keep the money for a rainy day, but we can't spend it on a rainy day because we might breach the regulations. Well, what are you doing with it? It's just really the level of frustration. I just think with the fans, and I think every fans group and every pod I've seen, everyone's just the same. It's just like, what is this? What is this utter mess? What is this utter shambles? And the fact that you can come out and justify, you don't have the self-awareness to even realise you could have come out and just said, listen, that didn't go as we'd hoped. So we're going to try and do better next time, right? At least 50% of the fans, would have been with you then. We wouldn't have had this unanimity. Because the fact that you turned the Celtic Supporters Association against you, that is breathtaking. They would have supported the old board into oblivion. That's how wedded they are to the officialdom at Celtic Park. There wouldn't be a club, if they did their way. That's how wedded to the board they are. And you turned them. That is unbelievable. I never thought I'd see that day, I have to say. And, as far as I understand it probably wouldn't have happened. I think the leadership, didn't want that to happen. But the member clubs were just like, no, we're not having it. This is enough. This is enough. Because all the excuses they use, we've heard before. Mm-hmm. All our frustration at having these conversations again and again and again is the same, because the frustrations are still valid because their excuses are still ridiculous. You go through that statement point by point and you tear it to pieces. It is utter nonsense. So I don't know where they think they're going to fall on this, but it's not going away. So, it's going to be interesting to see how they react.
Yeah, and talking the next steps and touching on some of the stuff that Paddy's already brought up. What are the next steps? What happens next? Before I get into that, though, I remember back in the late 80s where Des Lynam, what was the TV show? Was it Grandstand that he used to present, John? Yeah. Again, Patrick, sorry, mate, way above your head. different point of reference. And there was two people behind. They used to do it in a studio where you've seen all the workers is getting on with their kind of work and having their sandwiches and all that, and two guys started fighting. You remember that, John? Can you remember that? Yeah. Hopefully the videography team doesn't start fighting over a tripod behind my shoulder here whilst we're talking Celtic. In relation to next steps, John, you're absolutely right. You cannot overstate the importance of the Celtic Supporters Association getting on board with a no confidence vote. So if we go back to the dark old days of the 90s, the OGs of Celtic action and Celtic movements, the Celtic rebel spirit was born, and the CSA wanted to back the board. They wanted to back the old dynasty. They didn't want Fergus McCann coming in. And that, their attitude hasn't changed. They've been around since the 1940s. Their attitude's never ever changed. They have their name, and they will be at the meeting tonight, it is, in Glasgow, where those who have signed, the groups who have signed that letter, are being invited to a meeting or a rally this evening, whereby it's very much democratic. This is a fan movement. This is a collective. I mean, I was even talking to the North Curve who said this isn't a North Curve statement. A lot of people think because of the branding of it, this is a North Curve statement. It's a collective. And everybody underneath that open letter has been invited to a meeting tonight to look at the survey results. They sent out a survey. Don't know if you've seen it, Patrick, where they were talking about objectives. What are the objectives of this collective? What are the actions of this collective? That's all going to be spoken about tonight and agreed. And then next steps and next actions will be agreed upon and shared in time from the collective group. There will be a steering group. They will be set up this evening. All that kind of stuff. We're organised, Patrick. if we want to go back to the Celtic statement, who were trying to, use Rangers as some kind of leverage to curry favour with the fans, their fans couldn't stabilise, mobilise, get together. They were not galvanated, John. They were not galvanated. And they certainly were not galvanised either. But tonight is a massive night. And I think the Celtic supporters who will be watching from afar, waiting for updates, those in the room, will realise that it's a moment in time that we need to seize. We can't, let anything else get in the way of us pushing this forward.
Yeah, totally agreed. I'm glad it's happening tonight. I'm glad that people are coming together, because I think it does need a unified front, and I hope that we all can stay unified. I know, we all have slight differences of opinion. We all come on here and either fan media or written media, fan organisations. I'm sure we all have different views, but the one thing that we do agree on, we must focus on, and that is the need for change. So I'm glad that that's happening tonight. People are coming together, and next steps will be discussed. I did see that survey. There's obviously a few options of how people would be willing to protest and show their frustration. Hopefully, the more popular of the options can be suggested and encouraged, and we can show the club that, or the club's hierarchy, I should say, that we're not happy, we're not going away, and that they are not listening to us, and we are going to do our best to force change. So, fingers crossed that that meeting is sort of substantive and productive, and can bear fruit going forward. And I'm looking forward to the next steps. Just the statement obviously was what angered a lot of people, but obviously the minutes from the meeting on the Friday were also leaked. And there's just a few points. I mean, we're talking about this big pile of money that we allegedly aren't allowed to spend. Baffling, really. But they did go into the finances in that meeting. Again, they didn't answer the 7 questions in the open letter. They got the 3 organisations that they always speak to into the room, hoping to soften the criticism, and they all voted a vote of no confidence. So it shows you just how out of touch they are. But just in the finances section of those minutes, the hotel is now unlikely, blaming public transport. The museum won't happen as planned. They're talking about significant stadium maintenance. There was a bit of the stadium in January damaged by the storm that wasn't fixed until May. There was I don't know if what you call it, the Jock stand. It was sitting damaged for 4 months. Outside of the stadium, in terms of the banner, I think it's where legends are made, or this is Celtic, or something like that. Club like no other. Again, I think it's the Jock end of the stadium. Has been lying bare. It looks absolutely knackered. It looks decades old. But allegedly they've invested in the stadium. They also say that a rebuild of the south stand, i.e. the main stand, is also not possible while we remain in the SPFL, cost prohibitive. So we're passing up on an opportunity to qualify for the Champions League. We can't spend the 70 odd million of cash sitting in the bank, but they say that they can't improve or redevelop the main stand because they don't have enough money. I mean, it's the irony is off the charts, really. So, I come back to the meeting tonight that you'll be attending, the interview that you're going to be having with David Lowe today, and will be released later this week, I imagine. I can't wait to hear what the next steps are. I know, just anecdotal evidence, talking to people, the amount of people that have come off the Home Cup ticket scheme, or don't plan on buying the Europa League package, might buy the package but might not attend the games. I don't think this is going to be any time soon. I really hope it doesn't, because I think change is necessary, no matter how good we end up playing on the football pitch. And just in terms of events coming up, they're obviously going to release the prices for the Europa League. Now, I think we are charging Hibs fans £39 to sit behind a pillar. So God knows what they're going to be charging Celtic fans to watch us probably lose to Utrecht at home. I imagine it'll be close to 40 quid. And then the annual report always comes out in the middle of September, so I would expect that next week. So that will be another great laugh, just to see exactly what the bank balance was on the 30th of June, 11 days before we get £17 million for Nicholas Kuhn. So again, I don't think this is going away. I think they have got very lucky that the next home game isn't until the 27th of September. But I really don't think that anger will have subsided by then. And another point would be Brendan's press conference on Friday. I mean, I'm really, really looking forward to hearing what he has to say on all this. And I really hope someone asks him what his understanding of UEFA FSR is, because he's not mentioned that in any press conference when talking about transfer dealings. So I wonder if he was made aware of that when he couldn't get the players that he wanted. So, I'm very optimistic that tonight's meeting, guys like David Lowe doing the interview, the collectivised nature of the support at the moment, I'm hoping all that can continue, because obviously we can't go on as we are, because we're facing a 2018 scenario where the board stick their head in the sand, they downsize, and we end up spending years going backwards and eventually lose the league. And I think we need to stop that from happening.
Well, just add in there what in terms of potentially losing the league and the downsizing and all the rest of it, we are in a really precarious position now. And I think you're 100% right there, Patrick. This has real COVID vibes about it, and I hope that Brendan, because Brendan's basically gone at the end of the year, so I hope that Brendan comes out on Friday and just says, "I've got nothing to tell you, because you just need to talk to them." It's not I'm not responsible for it. I'm not accountable for it, and it's down to them. And you need to talk to them about it. I've got nothing to say. Let's talk about the football. Because why should he defend them?
No, you're right. Point. You're right, John. And I want to talk about Brendan and the team in the last 7 or 8 minutes of this. But what I find really interesting is there's a line in that statement which says, "We recognise the importance of timing." Now, to go back to what Patrick says, right? If you want to think about timing, right? So apparently, John, there's going to be an Adidas drop of merchandise tomorrow, right? We are due to release the prices of the Europa League packages. I don't know who works for social media at Celtic, but you've got my sympathies, guys. And of course, you've got the Friday statement with Brendan Rodgers. Timing is absolutely everything, right? Wow. And with regards to that, I think it needs to be inbuilt. It needs to be built into whatever their PR response is. And I said this during the week, John, they're clearly not capable of PR in-house, and they would be best to employ somebody to deal with this, because they've made such a mess of it. There's no way out. Yep.
Absolutely. And so would, who have you got doing PR in-house? Have you actually got a PR? Have you got, there's a difference between your social media and your communication teams and your PR teams. A very close friend of mine was a PR consultant for many years, and it's very different from the normal running of things. And you need that objective viewpoint, and to understand how it's going to be perceived, not by you, not by your internal people, but by people outside. And our guys clearly have no understanding of that, none at all. The fact that they felt that statement was appropriate just puts to bed all these ideas that it's properly run. All these, any notion that we had, that things behind the scenes were like a slick, well-oiled machine. Nonsense, utter nonsense. And the fact that, as I say, what does that mean then in these departments? Because if we can't see any fault in our approach, which is what they basically said, there is no fault in our approach. Listen, we're listening to you, but we're right, and we will take into account your opinions, but we're right. And going forward, we will continue to be right. So if you wouldn't mind, just keeping it zipped. All right. And again, I don't know what's going to come of this. As I say, there's no obvious solution here, but I think the inaction is not an option. Whether it forces change or not, we cannot have inaction. We must take steps, any steps at all that are agreed upon to get in there. And the worst part of what I've seen there in those comments is someone going on about real fans will be there to support the team and all the rest of it. Real fans are also the people who are incredibly concerned about this. And people not going to watch the team is a huge sacrifice for people, if they decide not to do that. Now, again, people deciding they don't want to buy merch, people deciding they don't want to buy anything in the stadium. Just do what you feel you're comfortable with, but don't give me any real fans nonsense, right? Because if you don't think the team realise what's going on, you are deluded. If you think they are expecting full stadiums with 100% backing for them with no interruption, when we are trying to make things better for them, the captain has already asked for players. The Maeda would be deeply unhappy. I mean, I can't imagine. Not only did we tell them they couldn't go because we didn't have any replacements, we then sell Ida, who we told the same thing, and so we sell the main guy, main striker, and we let him go, but we can't let you go, and I can't imagine how he was feeling after that. And it does give some explanations to why he hasn't been able to trap a bag of sand since the start of the year. But hopefully now, I mean, the only hope we have, I think, on the field is that these guys have got a World Cup to prepare for, and they can't afford to be garbage all year, or for the first sort of 5-6 months. They just can't afford to be that poor, or they'll risk their places. So, and they don't want to be off form or unfit or whatever either. So hopefully they keep that in mind. That's their goal in mind, because certainly their goal isn't for us anymore to be a massive success, because they obviously want out the door. Because we showed them the door and then we closed it. They're like, and then we opened it again. Look, no, and then we closed it. And then so I don't know. As I said before, if Brendan can turn this round this season, it's going to be a miracle. But I despair of Brendan as well. I mean, I know that his coaching team, etc., would have been talking to him about tactics and trying to maximise the squad that we have under a different system. And I'm confident in the fact that he's looked at that and said, no, we're still playing 4-3-3, which is, especially with the imbalanced squad we currently have, is madness. It is madness to carry on down this road, because not only are things not better, they are worse. So, to carry on trying to play that system with the players that we have and leave good players, properly good players on the bench, is bad.
When we talk about Brendan coming back, just to close off on the football topic, Patrick, Brendan comes back, and one of the things he spoke about in his very first press conference was legacy, and how at that point his legacy was in tatters, and it did mean a lot to him, and he came back to Celtic, and part of that was to repair his legacy, right? And we're going into this storm. We're in the middle of the storm, actually, as it stands. And I'm a bit like John. I'm thinking, in terms of what he's got, he's going to have to try and wring out as much as possible. There needs to be a kind of inner sanctum where you try and shut out the noise. If you ask me about the board, I'm go and ask them. I'm concentrating on my team, and he needs to believe, I think, that he can still keep this legacy intact, because otherwise, if it starts to fall to bits, we have seen that. We've been in this movie before. John's wearing the jersey in homage to it. We've been in that movie, because when I look at that top, I think of Shane Duffy. And you need to look at Brendan and say, right, despite all the noise and everything that's happening in the background, is he capable? I think he is, of being able to galvanise the team and get as much as possible out of them.
Well, in that sense, we are very lucky, because Brendan Rodgers is not Neil Lennon in the best of ways. He is a Premier League quality football manager. He's never lost a league title as a Celtic manager. And of course, the Rangers team that we're facing is not the same Rangers team that got, I think it was 102 points or something during the COVID season. And then there's all sorts of different, COVID regulations and stuff that aren't in place. So I think, we're currently 6 points clear. In terms of results, we've made a half-decent start in the league. So, I hope that doesn't become a disaster as well. I'm still pretty hopeful that we will win the league, as bad as the last 2 weeks have been. So, in terms of legacy, that would be a brilliant way for Brendan to bow out. John said, I think we discussed it 18 months ago, the January window. They always say the January window is a very tough window to do business. It would appear that every window is a tough window to do business for these guys. So I don't think the squad will change all that much in January. Obviously, Jock comes back. We'll maybe sign a loan player or two, or there might be a fire sale. But I think the squad that he's got, and I think the reality has dawned on almost everyone that he will leave at the end of this season. So he knows this is what he's got to work with, and he knows that he has to be, better than Rangers over the next 34 games in order to maintain that legacy. I did see a few suggestions a few days ago that, if he was to resign and, rip up the NDA that is allegedly signed after every managerial spell and come out and, throw the board under the bus, that might salvage his reputation. But I think he knows that because of what happened last time, he will need to see out these 3 years and make sure that the footballing season doesn't become a bigger disaster. And that we can win the league, hopefully win the cups, and who knows with the Europa League. It remains to be seen how this squad performs once all the new boys are sort of fit and integrated with the rest of the squad. So luckily for us, I think Brendan is capable of doing the business. As it stands, I still think we'll win the league, but we've massively put ourselves on the back foot because of the shambles of the last 2 weeks. I say the last 2 weeks actually. I'm pretty sure registration for the playoff round of the Champions League closed on August 14th. So I think as far as I'm concerned, I think August 14th was when this all started as the Omni shambles. That's the point of failure, actually. But as far as Rodgers and the team goes, I wish them nothing but success this season. Brendan Rodgers, I think because of the duration and because of what he'd done in his first spell and then the European campaign we had last season, I think he's almost certainly the best Celtic manager I've seen. Certainly in living memory. I was alive for Martin O'Neill, but I don't remember it. So I wish him nothing but the best for the rest of this season, and I think everyone has now accepted that he'll be away at the end of this year.
I'll just add in there, Patrick, that this board have more tough windows than a factory that makes bulletproof glass.
You're right, John. Every single window is a tough one. Now, we've spoken about everything from leadership and also the coming together of the Celtic fan base. We'll be updating you as soon as we possibly can on that one. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and we will get you more involved in the chat tomorrow when I'm back on the usual system. Obviously, I'm playing away from home today, not that way, in a different way. And I'm in Glasgow recording so that I'm here for This Is Acsom with David Lowe, and then later on tonight for the meeting at Gracie's. If you're in there, come along and say hello. It will be great to see you. And if not, come back at 12:30 for more of a Celtic State of Mind.